When it comes to Fender guitars, there's always two sides of the coin that I'll always let customers know about. Number one being their more kind of vintage inspired guitars, and number two, their more modern inspired guitars. This brand new collection that we're going to be looking at today, I think in my personal opinion, combines the best parts of both of them in an incredibly usable and great sounding guitar. What we're going to be looking at today is the brand new Fender Ultra Luxe Vintage Collection. Now there's a few guitars that I'm going to be going over today, so if you want to see a particular model, I will split this video up into chapters, but let's just start with the one that's in my lap. Now with the name Ultra Luxe Vintage, there is one kind of important word in there, and that is the vintage side to that. So the guitars that we're going to be looking at today are inspired by the 50s and 60s models from Fender's history. Now these aren't any new guitars that they have included in any range, just look at the vintage or the Vintera range for those kind of classic designs. But before I let you know exactly what the Ultra Luxe Vintage Collection is, let's get a couple of sounds from this particular 50s Strat. Sound-wise, there are some absolutely classic Strat tones, and they're going to be helped by the pure vintage 57 single coils that are in this one here. But that's quite an important thing, I guess, with the whole ethos of these guitars, because it is a kind of tale of two styles sort of like smashed together in the best way possible. So for example, you've got the classic single coils, and they're not the noiseless ones that you would expect from one of the more modern guitars like the Ultra range. But then it has these vintage style aesthetics as well. I hope this really turns up on the camera here as well, but we may just get a little kind of closer look at it. But these have all got heirloom nitrocellulose finishes on them, and they've got this absolutely stunning checking across the board. So these are going to age absolutely beautifully, especially if you are taking them on the road. And that's quite an important thing, that these guitars, I think, will have like players who play a lot of gigs in mind. Because while it may have this vintage aesthetic to it, a lot of the other appointments are extremely modern. For example, the neck here, this is an altered D, they're actually calling this one. It's very, very familiar to the Ultras that they've already had for a while, but it's an incredibly comfortable neck with a 10 to 14 inch compound radius on it with medium jumbo frets. We've got lock-in tuners, we've got like not the brass ones, that's a little bit later in there. We've got block saddles on there and an S1 switch as well as a neck carve. So like I was saying right at the start of the video, it's got those kind of like really like kind of ideal parts from both eras. You've got the vintage aesthetics, but then we've got the modern sort of like take on a playing guitar. So your tuning is going to be rock solid on this. You can play on this for absolutely hours, and you've got loads and loads of variation in tones, which let's get a few more out of this. let's very quickly go over the S1 switch, which is just located right in your volume knob there. Nice and discreet, but also really easy to get to if you need to. So with the Stratocasters, and this applies to the next one we're going to talk about as well, which is the 60 Strat, what this is essentially doing is it will bring your neck pickup in to a couple of the classic sort of like settings on the toggle selector there. So when it's up, we have all our standard 5-way selectors positions there. But what we're getting if we're on the first and the second position is it's going to start adding in the neck pickup. So here is off just with our bridge pickup. And then we're on that classic second position there, which is our bridge and our middle pickup. I just want to hear how that sounds with a bit of drive on it there as well. There are two finishes available in the 50s model here. I've got the white blonde in my lap, but there is also a 3-tone sunburst as well for that. Now let's move on to our next Stratocaster. As I mentioned already, there is a 60s model as well, which I've chosen today in this absolutely stunning ice blue metallic, and you actually might be able to see that checking just a little bit more on this model, especially on the back. But this also comes in a seafoam green as well. Now, I don't need to particularly go into too many of the specs because this still has very much the same sort of vibe in terms of kind of classic looks, kind of going for more of that kind of classic 60s sound as well, with the pure vintage 61 single coils that are in this one. And it has that same S1 switch, so you can bring in the neck pickup on a couple of the positions. Now, the difference with this one here, not only the colour, but it also has a rosewood board on it, but it's also going for that 10 to 14 inch compound radius also. With it being a 60s model as well, it should have slightly different sounding pickups here, so let's see what these pure vintage 61 pickups are sounding like. is probably a good chance to say what the benefits of some of these more sort of modern aesthetics and hardware options are on these guitars. So I've already alluded to the locking tuners on there. That's just going to make string changing easy and will mean that your tuning will stay nice and solid for a long time. But one of the things that I particularly like, and this will maybe be a bit more apparent on the Telecasters when I start to talk about them as well, but with this 2-screw tremolo here with the block saddles here, they are just going to be nice and easy for you to get your intonation sorted. Again, with those more vintage inspired like Telecasters, Strats don't tend to need to worry about them that often because you can get access to the screws. But with more vintage style Teles, they've got those like ashtray bridges on them, which means that intonation can be a bit funny. And certainly with more vintage inspired instruments too, like with like a 50 Strat or something like that, you need to take the neck off to adjust the actual truss rod within it. Which, you know, to some guitar techs and stuff, they're pretty good with that. But if you're just going to be doing this at home, if you know what you're doing with it, it's going to be much, much easier because you've just got your truss rod access at the top there. A couple of extra bits with them as well. It does have a lovely satin neck. This is across all of the guitars as well. And that has also got a little bit of that checking on it as well. So it's going to really get that kind of nice, like, worn feel you see on the custom shop models. And if you're looking for something that's just that little bit more punchy with the Stratocasters, the 60s model also comes in an HSS variety, which personally for me, this would be the one that I would be going for just because of the variety of sounds with it. Now, exactly all the same appointments as the 60s Strat that we were just talking about there. The major difference, the fact that it has a Fender Haymaker humbucker in the bridge there. The S1 switch there, that's going to split that into a single coil, so you get all the same sounds as that one. But let's hear how this sound handles with a little bit of distortion behind it. And just so you can hear what the difference between that humbucker and the single is, I'll just give you a couple of chords here just so you can hear exactly what it's doing. Tons of tonal variety with this one, and that's one of the kind of particular things that I love about an HSS Strat, is especially when you are able to split that humbucker into a single coil, because sometimes that Strat bridge pickup, especially if it is a single coil, can just be that little bit too harsh, especially if you are doing like quite high gainy stuff, but to still have it at your fingertips is such a great option. Okay, let's move on to the Telecasters now, and this is probably out of the models that we're talking about today that have had the most changes done to their bodies. You can maybe see immediately with this one here, but It actually has an arm carve on the front, which you don't traditionally see on 50s or 60s tellies. And on the back, it's got the belly cut as well as the neck carve there, which if you find that corner of the Telecaster just that little bit irritating and obviously want it a little bit more comfy, these guitars are absolutely perfect for that. All the other combinations are much the same as well. We have exactly the same necks that are on the Strat, those augmented D shapes with the compound radius and the medium jumbo frets, lock-in tuners on there. The kind of major difference with the Telecaster, particularly the 50s one here, is that it still has those block saddles on them. As I was talking about, you know, that's just going to make your intonation so much easier to set. There are brass ones on here as well, so we are still that kind of like vintage era spec, but just in a more kind of modern take there. One of the little things that I thought was quite funny about this as well is that they have this like slightly angled three-way selector there, which usually a Telecaster is obviously parallel to the body. I think that's just going to be a little bit easier for you to get to, you know, especially if you're on like a big dark stage or something like that. But what this has got installed as well is the pure vintage 51 Telecaster pickup switch, and as telly as they get. So the Telecaster also includes the S1 switch on your master volume knob there as well, but unlike the Stratocaster, which brings in the neck pickup and splits on the HSS there, what this is doing is it's actually going to be changing the middle position sound. So regularly with the Telecaster configuration there, when you're in the middle, both pickups are in parallel there, giving you that kind of nice sort of sparkly sound. But when you hit that, that's actually going to change them into series, essentially giving you one big old humbucker there. The 50s telly is available in the butterscotch blonde, which is obviously your classic telly colour, as well as the white blonde, which was the 50s Strat that I started out with as well. And you're able to see the grain through these as well, which I think is such a cool little option, especially when that nitrocellulose finish is going to start kind of wearing away. You're going to see a little bit more of that, and it's going to become like really your guitar, because it's that sort of thing. If you're obviously playing and your arm's going to be rubbing off of that arm cutaway there, you're going to start getting some marks there, you're going to maybe get some marks where your pick goes, all that. Each one is going to be quite personal to each player after they've played it for a little while. And then moving on to our last model of the day, it is the 60s Tele Custom, which I've not left my favourite one until the last, but Certainly a Tele Custom is one of my favourite guitars just because of that binding. Binding on a Tele is absolutely awesome in my eyes anyway. The only thing they have kind of missed out on this one is that arm cutaway. You've got a bit more of a classic sort of Tele edge there, but that was just obviously so they can get the binding on it. This one doesn't have the brass saddles on it as well, and it's also got the pure vintage 63 single coils, but all the other bits are exactly the same, opting more for a rosewood board, which is of course a little bit more 60s styled. The 60s Tele is available in Lake Placid Blue and a 3-tone sunburst, which has also got that front binding to it as well. And that covers all of the brand new models in the Fender Ultra Luxe Vintage Collection. As I said right at the start of the video here, I think this kind of sort of mashes together the best of both worlds with Fender. This isn't anything new for the Big F. They're always kind of like implementing a little bit of modern, a little bit of the vintage, unless you are going for like the two polar opposites of that. But this feels like kind of the best combination of that they have done. Certainly for any player who needs a live guitar, I think this is where this is really going to come in handy. For anyone who's doing a lot of gigs and you need a proper pro level instrument, you definitely owe it to yourself to check these out if you are a Fender fan. But let me know what you think about these brand new guitars down in the comment section below, and while you're down there, give us a like and a subscribe and you can keep up with all the latest news at Guitar HQ. But until next time, I've been Kieran and I've just been checking out the brand new models in the Fender Ultra Luxe Vintage Collection. Have a great day.